Hello, welcome for this new video about the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Last time we had gone through the introduction of the Tantra, and the last part of it we had read was explaining that the way to know the divine and to awaken to the divine is through his Shakti. For in fact, Shakti or power is nothing but the divine's own self-knowledge. How to know something? By knowing what it can do. Knowing fire means to know what it can do, like cooking, throwing a light, drying up, and so on. So, the knowledge of something or someone is the knowledge of what it can do. And what the divine can do, that is what reality can do, is called here Shakti. And we had also a quote last time in the commentary by Shivopadhyaya. A quote from the Pratyabhijñā Tika, that is Utpaladeva's own self-commentary on his poem about recognition, and it was saying that the power of something, the Shakti of something, becomes clear when its effects become obvious. So knowledge is through experience or experiences, like the different sides, different facets of a diamond. So there is something here which is both gradual, knowing one facet after the other, and sudden. For all knowledge is in fact self-knowledge. Self is called Shiva and knowledge or experience is called Shakti. But those two, like fire and its powers, are not two. They can be distinguished to introduce knowledge, but they are not really two things. They are one thing spoken of in many different ways and in two different ways, Shiva and Shakti. So any experience is self-experience, is already experience of the self. So by experience, we deepen self-knowledge. But what we want is not only self-knowledge, because everything is self-knowledge, but full self-knowledge, complete. And thus, this teaching of the Vijnana Bhairava is about self-knowledge, but ultimate, full self-knowledge, mindfulness, full awareness, so to speak. And so now we are coming to the verse number 22, yes. When the goddess after having listened to those answers by the god, she asks again, Om devadeva triśūlāṅka kapālakṛtabhūṣaṇa digdeśakālaśūnyā vyapadeśavivarjitā. So, O God of gods, devadeva, triśūlāṅka, who has as his sign, as his emblem, the triśūla, the trident, which are here symbolizing the three main powers of will, knowledge, and action. Kapālakṛtabhūṣaṇa, who wears as an ornament a skull, which is here, according to the mythology, one of the heads of Brahma that Shiva has cut as a punishment for Brahma's arrogance and lies and deceit. And but so doing, Shiva killed, not exactly Shiva, because everything is Shiva, but that incarnation of Shiva, because in Shaivism there are also incarnations of the Supreme God, just like the avatars in Vaishnavism. But here they're called murtis, crystallization, solidifications. And having cut one of Brahma's heads, Shiva had committed the sin of killing a Brahmin, because Brahma, of course, is a Brahmin, the highest among the traditional social classes, the highest one, the most sacred. And so, following the rules of the law, the laws of nature, according to that tradition, he had to undergo a vow of begging his food for 12 years in the skull of the head he had cut. Not the one he had killed, because of course Brahma was not dead by having one head less, but Shiva had nevertheless to atone for that sin by begging his food in that skull. And the sadhus in India, the Shaiva sadhus, are following that example, because behind that appearance of begging and humiliating oneself in order to purify one's sins, there is a deeper practice. And that practice, the idea is to go beyond duality. And duality is mainly the duality of good and bad, of pure and impure. Not exactly good and bad in the moral sense, but more in the social sense, the customs, the traditions. And going against the traditions is impure, and especially whatever has whatever is in touch with impurity, with death, becomes itself impure and makes others impure, so that you cannot anymore be touched. You're untouchable, and so you're an outcast. So Shiva is an outcast, but while so doing, he expresses his transcendence, that he's beyond all those stories, all those fictions, all those scarecrows, as he was saying just before in that same introduction of the Tantra. So Shiva wears a skull and a trident, and he lives outside society, outside the civilized world. Digdeśakālaśūnyā, and Now the goddess, after having called for the god for his attention, Hey devadeva, O god of God. Now she asks about herself again, the state of fullness, the state of full awareness. Digdeśakālaśūnyā. That state, yāvasthā, which is empty of directions and times, space and time. Vyapadeśavivarjitā, which is devoid of examples that can be shown, pointed out. And that state, which is empty of all forms, of all names, bharitākārā, which is a state of fullness, which is the very fullness, bhairavasya, of the divine, of God, of Shiva. Upālabyate, it is experienced directly. Kair, upāyair, by which means, how do we experience that fullness? Mukhaṃ tasya parā devi. The Supreme Goddess is said to be the door to get into that state. The door, the face, literally. That's what the God had said before. So now the Goddess is repeating. You've just said that I am the door. Katham bhavet, but how do that Supreme Goddess, who is the door, comes about? How to reach that state? Yathā samyag ahaṃ vedmi, tathā me brūhi Bhairava. O God, O Bhairava, brūhi me, tell me, tathā me brūhi, tell me, so yathā samyag ahaṃ vedmi, so that I know correctly, truly. Yathā ahaṃ vedmi tathā Bhairava brūhi, mām amarshaya, make me realize. Don't just tell me the things, but make me realize directly. Amarshaya, to realize, to become, to feel deeply. And here is the end of Kshemaraja's commentary. Kshemaraja was one disciple of Abhinavagupta, the most famous master of Kashmir Shaivism. And we know that he had written a commentary on that Tantra, but unfortunately it has disappeared except for the commentary on those 23 first verses. And from then on, the commentary has been completed by one Shivopadhyaya who lived, it seems, in 18th century, and in his time the most of Kshemaraja's commentary had already been missing. So he endeavored to write a new one, but while doing so, he's also basing himself a lot on another commentary that we do have, which was written maybe 100 years ago, Shivopadhyaya, in the 17th century, maybe. One commentary called The Moonlight by one Ananda, who lived, it seems, in the 17th century. So Shivopadhyaya, in his commentary, is expanding mostly on Ananda's commentary. He is taking the main ideas and he is expanding upon them. So now, the 112 means begin. The God answers, and he's going to teach 112 means to direct realization, to the direct experience of full experience. the fullness of awareness. Because everything is awareness, everything is experience, but experience is not always full, not always ultimate experience, complete experience. So here we're guided to the fullness of experience, to the part of experience I was about to say, but this is a little bit paradoxical, because how can the part of experience be the whole of it? So it's trying to point at the heart of experience, but the heart of experience, because really all experience, whatever the differences and however fragmented and distracted and scattered and broken and contracted and tense they are always endowed with a heart which is full, which, like the root of a tree, contains everything of the tree, of the many branches. The many branches, they may be separated, but they're all contained in the root. And this is what Kashmir Shaivism says. Everything, all possible details of experience, all possible destinies are contained in the heart, in awareness, in the heart of awareness, rather. So, now the God starts the 112 experiences, the 112, so they're called dharnas upadesha, rather, at the end of the text. Upadesha means direct instruction, practical, stripped of any other consideration, direct, very simple, for someone who can understand and to get directly at the heart of the matter. So the first one is very important. The first one are very important. Nothing is random here. Om urdhve prano hyadho jivo visargatma parocharet. So sorry, it was written pra in my edition. Parocharet utpatti dvitayasthane bharanat bharita sthitihi. So, very often in those verses, the last quarter describes the experience itself. So here, being as fullness, bharitākārā sthitihi, dwelling, remaining, living as fullness. How? Utpatti dvitayasthane, by we live in fullness by living, by remaining in the two places of arising. Remaining in the two places of arising. Arising of what? Arising of breath, or for that matter, of any movement. To put it briefly, Kashmir Shaivism as a practice is entirely about movement. Everything is movement. Movement of the breath, of the thought, of speech, of the body, of things in the world. And any movement has a beginning and an end. And so there are two main ways of practice. The practice of paying attention to the beginning of movement, any movement, and the practice of paying attention to the end of movement, of any movement. So here we start with the most natural movement we can be aware of, breathing. Out, in, out, in. And so we pay attention, we live in the place of arising of those movements, the place of arising of out breath, the place of arising of in breath. So the first line of the verse now describes those two places of arriving in very symbolical ways. Urdhve prāṇo hi adho jivo. The movement going up, urdhve, is called prāṇah. But here it is not prāṇah in the general sense of vital energy. It means out-breath. The out-breath which is going up from the heart, from the lungs, if you will, through the throat, the mouth, or the nose, and outside. Traditionally, for someone who, like us, is more or less at rest, at 12 finger width. Just to give an idea, it's not an exact measurement. And the breath is going out, and it's called prāṇa. And the breath also is going in and down, back to the lungs, to the heart. Adho jiva, and it is called jiva because it is thanks to that in-breath that we can live, so it is called life. Jiva, it is called life. And those two movements, with those two starting points, which are also reaching points, depends the point of view. The first starting point is the heart, at the beginning of out-breath, and the second is the space at 12 finger breath, that is more or less 2 hands, like this. So that space, the outer space, is the other starting point of the in-breath, of the jiva, also called apāna. And those two movements are to be realized as two movements of the same life. And thus, as those 2 points, being those 2 movements with the 2 points, the 2 starting points of the heart and the 12 and the space outside, are one and the same life, one and the same experience, one and the same awareness, in-breath, out-breath, plus the spaces between them, the intervals between them. They are one space, they are one life, one movement, one cycle. And thus, parā, uccharet, one should recite the Supreme Goddess, because that breath cycle is the Supreme Goddess. And it will be taught again in more detail at the end of the Tantra. After the 112 experiences have been taught, it will be explained in more detail how natural breathing is the natural recitation of the natural mantra, of the sacred mantra, but a mantra which is natural. It's not in any language, it is innate, completely natural. And if one becomes aware of that, which means if one can appreciate, feel that to its full value, then that is the true mantra recitation, and this is the real spiritual accomplishment. And just the fact of breathing, just the fact of life, because breathing is life, becomes the practice. So everything depends on a point of view, on where attention is and how one considers everything. Not just what is, but how do I feel about what is. What is Shiva, but what I feel about what is Shakti. And Shakti is even more important than Shiva, because everything depends on that. All is being, but the heart of being is that power that we may call awareness or desire, which is feeling, tasting, relishing, judging also, and becoming thoughts and language for the better and the worse. But when I put all my awareness, me who I am the goddess, full awareness was lost herself into the details of experience, when I completely turn back and give myself fully to the heart of what arises instant after instant, those breath cycles, then it becomes wonderment, amazement, the wonder of consciousness, the wonder of awareness, chamatkar, which means also the miracle of awareness, the miracle of being, becoming aware, realizing, appreciating, feeling that being is absolutely a miracle. Incredible, because it's true absolute freedom coming out of nothing, just like spontaneously arising out of nowhere, self-creating each and every instant after instant. And so here, the first practice which is taught is the simple practice of listening to the movements of breath. It's not even really paying attention to a special place. It can be that, but the real aim, the real practice is just listening to the breath. And the real aim of the practice, as is made clear by the commentary of Shivopadhyaya, is to realize the oneness of all those opposite movements, out, in. And those movements of energy, of breath, of life energy, are the support for all the movements of life, conscious and unconscious, like accepting and rejecting, loving and hating, saying yes and saying no, fighting and running away, being attracted and being in aversion, being in love and being in hate, or whatever form of feeling of contraction and going away we might feel. All those are expansions and variations of out-breath and in-breath. Out-breath is giving away and also pushing back. And in-breath is taking in, eating, integrating, loving, appropriating. So the two big movements possible are those, yes and no, accepting and refusal, acceptation and refusal. That's the two big movements, the big basic movements. So by just listening to breath, without doing anything special, there is just a natural movement of uchcharit, elevation and expansion. Feeling, realizing naturally that all those opposites fighting together are two moments of one movement, of one life, of one cycle. Just by listening to the breath, by feeling the breath rather, like with devotion, with participation, with bhakti, taking part in it, with a full awareness, a full attention, with a full mind, with our whole being. And we come to realize by praying to breath in that way, that breath itself is a prayer, is the prayer of life. And it is the root, the basis of all other experiences, but usually it goes unnoticed. And then in the commentary, there are also a big deal of symbolic interpretation of that cycle of breath. At least 6 different. It can mean realizing the unity of unity and duality, of inside and outside, of the divine and the individual, of the impersonal, universal, and the personal individual, of the big me and the little me, if you like, of day and night, of all kinds of opposites, of formlessness and the activity of the waking state, deep sleep and waking state, taking birth and dying, construction and destruction, manifestation and disappearance, and so on. But there are 6 main interpretations covered, explained by Shivopadhyaya, that I'm not going to tell in detail here. What is important is just remembering a few things. First, there is a symbolism of all that. It's not just about listening to breath and that's it. Yes, it is just listening to breath, but there is a whole meaning that is being unpacked, which is being put into it, because there is a whole context. There is a world of symbols, of persons, which are being thus expressed through breath. It's not just breath and so what? I'm breathing, okay, thank you. No, there is a whole meditation on it, a whole tasting of it, together with words. Now, words and what is beyond words. But what is beyond words goes through words, and there are words which come from the beyond of words. So there is whole culture. And so there is a whole context of it. It's not just pointing at something, it's also recognizing. And recognizing, remember well that, is not just having an experience. No, it is making a connection between what I have understood before intellectually, if you will, what I have been taught, and what I experience here now. It's making that bridge. That is recognition. Like saying, oh, you remember the guy I have told you about? Well, he's here, look, it's him. That's called recognition. It's a mixture of conceptual knowledge and direct knowledge, putting the two together. If there is only direct knowledge, it is no full knowledge, there is no awakening. So we need both. This is what is recognition. And of course, it doesn't mean that the practice is complicated. It's just listening to the breath and noticing that there are spaces after each out breath, in breath, stop, out breath, stop, in breath, stop. They are all cycles, but they are moments of absolute peace. And just by listening, without further manipulation, there is that awareness of oneness, of silence, which is in complete harmony with the awareness of those two movements of in-breath and out-breath. So we come to have a direct experience of duality within unity, within an awareness of unity. And that is what is called awakening in Kashmir Shaivism. That is the goal. That is the state of fullness. That is the full experience. Awareness of duality, but within an awareness of unity. It's not mere duality, like most people. It is not mere unity, like in deep sleep or in some state of artificial meditation, but it is both. Because it is really like that. There is always that background, that space, and everything is appearing within that space, appearing and disappearing, coming and going within that space. So it's just becoming aware of what is, but fully aware, all the aspects, not just one aspect. And it is reconciling unity and duality, formlessness, and movements, actions, activity. And we will see then that the next experiences are deepening that understanding, that insight. So we will see that next time. Urdhve prano hyadho jivo visargatma parocharet. Listening to the breath is a recitation of mantra. The breath becomes mantra. Silent breath becomes mantra. And this is uchara also. This is elevation of the energy, meaning that attention is opening up. Attention is gathering, harmonizing, unifying, opening up into space, expanding, like a silent explosion. Utpattidvitayasthane. So there are two ways of practice, the beginning and the end of any movement, but we will come back to that. Those are really the keys to understand the practice of Kashmir Shaivism. Otherwise, you will get lost into the details and into fantasies, and you'll never get nothing concrete. It will just remain something in imagination. Bharanat, so by keeping attention, Bharanat, the fullness of attention. It's all practices of attention. Bharita sthitihi, and thus like that we have the full experience, all the aspects. The visarga, the 2 points. Visarga is the sound ah in Sanskrit, written most often with 2 dots, just like in our way of writing, 2 dots, one above the other, and those 2 dots, they are just 1 dot, and the 1 dot is 2 dots. Realizing that is awakening. So here the commentator gives us many interpretations and very nice quotations, most notably from the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra, which is the ultimate source of Tantra, Tantricism, according to Abhinavagupta. And a passage where is described the different means classified into 3 or 4. Let's say here that the 2 main ways of practicing I was talking about, related to the beginning and end of any movement, they are the practice of the end of any movement. It's the practice of silence, not speaking anything, not thinking anything. Akinchit chintakattvena, as Kshem Raja says, and here the Tantra says akinchit chintakasya, for someone who does not give a shit to anything, just quiet inside, no words. One practice, no words. Second practice is the beginning of any movement, the practice of feeling the rise from the 0 to the 1, from nothing to something, just the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of the arriving of any movement. Those are the 2 key practices of Kashmir Shaivism. And all the other practices, as many as there are only derivations, variations of those 2. Silence and feeling the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. So that's all for today. If you have questions, I'm there. If you want to share comments, experiences, whatever, you're welcome. And let me thank you for your kind attention, and let's see you again in the next video. Have a good day.